Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story, I love dip cones. If you have ever been in a divorce, you know step 1 is keeping the anger from going sideways. I had just been dumped by my wife who left with my 10-month-old son. I was in a bad place, depressed, angry, and so on. But I couldn't do that to the boy. I ended up at my folks' house in the middle of nowhere, Texas. A famous town for prisons. If you know the area, 80% of it is government money that gets paid monthly. And in this area there was a Dairy Queen like the ones we know and love. I did not care much about the job. I was overqualified, but I needed to earn the gas money to get back to the county where my son was. So I worked it during the week without caring about anyone but myself and him, and just kept pushing through. Until one day when my assistant manager is out cleaning the lobby while I'm on a break, and she is near tears, and even despite my own mental seclusion, it's hard to ignore someone obviously on the verge of crying. When I ask her what's wrong, she tells me that they doctored her paycheck. She worked 60 hours, and they paid her for 30, and that they do this all the time. I knew this was a crap job. But suddenly all my pent-up ex-wife anger started coming out sideways on the way home. I rolled through the best way to approach it, address management, nah, they know. Sue them, nope, you'd need fees for that, and the amount you win isn't enough. I did some digging and some other practices they were doing were illegal, violating pay laws. So after quickly realizing that getting 10 of my comrades to join me in a class action suit would be impossible because I'd have to explain it to them, I just ended up calling the Department of Labor of FLSA violations. Those are $1,100 a pop. Turns out not paying us wasn't the biggest problem, but the manager sent us on break whenever things slowed down and our labor/rev number got too high. On these breaks we weren't paid. So I talk around to the other folks there. It happens all the time. A manager had tried to bring it up in the past and gotten fired, and the assistant managers got me paper records. So I called up the local DOL office, filed a complaint, and made sure to mention that we were part of a franchise chain, where there are 130 stores in 3 states, and the rumor is this happens elsewhere. Nothing happens. So I called the executive director of my region, and I asked when will we have an answer on this. 3 weeks later, a guy from DOL is sitting in my crap town and wondering what the heck I'm doing there. I explain and we bond over getting crap kicked by divorce. A few weeks later I heard from him again. Over $1 million in fines. Turns out, the store manager, not the assistant, had her friend hack the computers to change the payroll information. And to confuse a dumbassery, when she left she stole a power washer. So the manager of the store was arrested for felony theft, some sort of hacking charge, and the parent company ended up filing for bankruptcy because they couldn't pay the fines. My old co-workers now get paid vacation time. And I have my son 50% of the time, and he's 6 now. Next story. Call the cops over a shower? So this happened about 5.5 months ago. This happened when I was staying at my parents' house for vacation. They are cardiologists who work for most of the day, around 10 to 15 hours a day. They were well paid and they loved their jobs. They live close to New York, so they had cameras, just in case, around the house because most of the time the house was left alone. This is a shortened version of what happened. I hear the doorbell ring and Karen stand at the door, alone. She asked if my shower was working and then asked if she could use it. I said no, and I kept saying no until she attempted to attack me cursing and saying random threats like she would call the cops and that her husband had the rights to kill me, which I obviously didn't believe. She then called the cops and I called my mom and told her everything. She then tried to talk to her through the phone, but she snatched the phone and broke it down to pieces. My mom probably realized this as she pulled up in the driveway, furious. The two had a large argument until the cops arrived. And as soon as the cops come out, they get a barrage of accusations of me assaulting her, threatening her, and how this was her house and I was trying to break in. Immediately after she gets so much proof that this is not her house, Mom decides to show the cops the cameras. The camera showed that she was attacking me, and the camera mics, I didn't know that was a thing until now, showed that she was trying to get in to probably shower and swipe a few valuables. She was then arrested and was charged for assault, destroying personal belongings, and she was fined. It turns out that she had multiple attempts to steal many things. She also was sent to jail for a while and hasn't heard from her since. My parents upgraded their security and I got a new phone. And when my dad heard of this, he was in a procedure at the time. He almost vomited because he was laughing so hard. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this and stay safe. Next story. Take the money I give for bills and squander it. Hope you like the court system. The background. I lived with a group of people who I thought were my friends. There were two couples, and we all lived in the same house for almost 2 years until I recently moved out. There was David, Tina, Brittany, and AJ. I was the only single person there. There was debate on how we should pay the bills, but we all decided to give the money to the person whose name was on the bill. David paid the mortgage, Tina paid the water and electric/gas, and I paid the internet. It came to the point where I was paying close to 80% to the mortgage by myself, plus the entire water bill, about 75% of the gas and electric, and I was paying the internet bill by myself. I was still giving the money to the person in charge of the bill, but came to find out about 10 days before I moved out that the mortgage was defaulted on and the house was in foreclosure. Also, the water, gas, and electric bills were in constant threat of being shut off, and that the only up-to-date bill was the internet. While they all saw me struggle to pay these off, they were mindlessly spending money during the day, which is when I sleep due to working third shift, so I never saw the mindless things they spent money on, nor did I ever see the mail since they grabbed it before I woke up. Brittany never paid anything as she was having her check garnished due to unpaid student loans, but she always had expensive makeup. AJ never held a job for more than 2 weeks. David and Tina were always calling into work knowing that I wouldn't allow them to go without a home due to our history. One day I woke up while they were all out and about doing something or other, so I went to go check the mail as I was expecting a package. When I saw the bills in the mail, I decided to investigate. I opened up the gas and electric bill, as they are by the same company, to see the total amount of almost $400 and in risk of being shut down. I was shocked and angry. I knew right then and there what was going on, and I vowed to screw them over as hard as I could. The revenge. I had just interviewed for a new job that paid almost double what I was making, and I knew that I interviewed well with them, so I told myself that if I got the job, I would give them a 30-day notice and move out. And as it was close to the end of the month and I had already paid them, I will be moving out before the 1st of February. I got the call with a job offer the next day, which I happily accepted. I did the paperwork for the background check and it all came back clean. The same day I accepted the offer, I typed out a 30-day notice and recorded myself with my phone in my breast pocket, handing it to them explaining that I was moving out. I started my job in my hunt for an apartment close to my new job, which I found within a week of starting. I took almost the entirety of my checks, set them aside for rent, deposits, and basic things that I would need. I was asked several times to help with the next month's bills, to which I said no, as I was saving for my own place and that they had plenty of time to come up with the money between the four of them, because I was doing it all by myself pretty much on a meager pay rate of $11 an hour before my new job. There were a lot of scowls, passive-aggressive behavior, and flat-out attempts to take or use my things or foods without permission. The day came when I finally went and got my U-Haul and had a few friends help me move. Free drinks and free lunch are the best payment ever, as they shared it all with me. I was determined to get it all in one go, so I got the biggest one they had. We got everything packed up. I took everything that was mine down to my pizza stone, which they loved, my expensive kitchen knives which they would use and never clean, even my toilet paper that I had just bought 3 days prior because I needed it. A few rolls went missing very quickly. After moving everything, I sat down on my couch, looked around, my cat in my lap, and breathed a sigh of relief. I happened to be good friends with my previous neighbors. We smoked each other out frequently and asked them to keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary. 4 days go by and I come to find out that the gas, electric, and water have all been turned off, and they were asking to fill up some buckets to manually flush the toilets, bathe in, and so on. Now both couples have dogs, which my cats hated as they were both hyperactive as hell, but I loved them. So I decided that those dogs were in a dangerous situation as they had no water, no heat in the middle of winter, and probably no food as I bought the last bag about 2 years prior. I hate to see an animal hungry, so I called a local humane society and left an anonymous tip about those dogs and how I was worried about them. The next day, my neighbor Todd texted me telling me that the dogs were removed from the home, that my previous housemates were being charged with neglect, and because of the lack of utilities, that these were not civil but criminal charges. This was enough for me to smile, but I wanted more. I knew that David was divorced and had a child. I also knew that he wasn't paying child support. I then contacted the local courts and made them aware of the flagrant non-support, and that maybe they could help the agency looking for him. I provided the address that we lived at, and that the homeowner was the one who was being looked for. From there, it came to light that he was almost $25,000 behind, which is a felony in the state where I live. He is now living with someone on their couch, as Tina left him and the house has been foreclosed on, and he has nothing to his name while facing multiple criminal charges. Next story. Cancel a land lease and hope to make a windfall? Hope you like a lot of dirt. Let me preface this by noting that this revenge was not my doing. At least not exactly. It happened back in the 90s when I was in high school and centered around the type of school I attended. So in case you weren't aware, it is very common in agricultural communities to have what are known as farmer schools. That's not a technical term but more just something easy to define. The schools are generally organized by the local farmers, and while you still study the various courses needed to get into college, you also study farming technology courses and get credit hours for work study, i.e. working on one or more farms. The area I lived in was surrounded by a number of large farms, which grew cotton primarily. So during the year we'd spend time out in the field both tilling, planting, and harvesting. One of the farms near the school was this 1,000-acre spread that, like the others, grew mostly cotton, though sometimes they rotated to soybeans or silage. Basically corn, but you don't actually harvest it. This farm had a long partnership with the school, so the students provided near free labor for the farmer. The farmer leased this property from some out-of-state owner and paid them a portion of the revenue from the harvest. Imagine my surprise then when I and many of the classmates all arrived at the farm to do our work study, and the farmer instructed some to crew the sprayers and start spraying herbicide on the fields, while others, myself included, were to take tractors and discs and plow everything under. The farmer wanted every square inch of the fields returned to just dirt. We were shocked to say the least, but after some discussion we set to work. It took us a better part of a weekend to do so, and when we were done, the field was in a beautiful if barren state. The farmer thanked each of us personally and paid us about $500 each, quite the sum for a 90s high school senior. We returned to the school, told our headmaster that the contract was completed, and he informed us that the farmer would no longer be working with the school and would be sent to one of the other large farms for the rest of the year and our work study. It was probably 2 or 3 months later before word started going around about why we'd been instructed to destroy the crop. Granted, these were just rumors, but based on how things turned out for the farmer, I suspect there is some truth to it. So apparently the landowner had decided that he was going to not renew the lease the farmer had on the land. This lease renewal just so happened to fall a few weeks before harvest season would start. Given that the average cotton farm earns about $1,500 per acre, a 1,000 acre farm would easily net the owner $1.5 million. About $500,000 of that being pure profit. I don't know what the farmer lease was, but it stands to the reason that it wasn't anywhere near that. So this landowner had figured out a neat little trick. Let the farmer get a gig crop planted and then refuse to renew the lease. The farmer would leave the plants in the field and the owner would just need to pay some contractors to come harvest it. And they would earn a profit. Since at the time the farmer's lease wasn't yet up, he decided to prevent that from happening. His act of revenge against the owner was to prevent them from cashing in on their hard work. Sure, it destroyed his farm, and he had to sell off most everything he owned to buy some property for himself. But he'd proved the point. The owner did try to sue the farmer, though he, the owner, really did not have a leg to stand on. Or so I was told. I think the court ruled that since the farmer was still under the lease, when he had the land tilled under, then it was his property to do with as he wished, and thus the landowner could not tell him what to do with his property. I learned a rather valuable lesson from that man, beyond what I learned about farming. And that lesson was, never ever cross someone with nothing to lose. Edit. Since it was brought up in the comments, let me add some details here. Cotton is one of the few crops which leave a negative nutrient value in the soil, meaning that after harvest, even if you till the dead plants under, or even if you till them prior to harvest, you won't have as much nutrients as you started with. That's why farmers will plant another crop, usually winter wheat, in place and then till it under rather than harvesting it. This is something commonly called a green manure, but it works to put nutrients that the cotton pulled out of the soil back into it. While the ground wouldn't have been completely dead or sterile, any crop planted on that tract of land without further treatment of the soil wouldn't have produced the same acre per acre yield that a comparable crop would have had he gone to harvest and planted the secondary crop, which means that the landowner would either have to plant the green manure and spend money that way, or pay by the ton to use artificial fertilizer. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.